the meeting is done today. All right. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Awesome. All right, so as I said before, this is Funding Your Future, co-facilitated by myself and Patrick Gordon. We work at the CLA Joyce K. Salzberg Center for Professional Development. As many of you know, this is kind of like CLA's, the College of Liberal Arts, dedicated career services center. So anything that you need related to professional development, resumes, cover letters, interview prep, networking, LinkedIn, any of that. That is something that you can meet with us about and make an appointment with us on Handshake for. But today's session is a little bit different, and it's something that I think both Patrick and I are very passionate about, which is, definitely related to professional development, but a little bit outside of, the scope of what we usually talk about. So really excited to be here with you all and to have this session about finance, budgeting, and also salary negotiation. All right, and I think I'll hand it off to Patrick and we'll get started.
Yeah, so first off, again, everybody, thank you for coming out and checking this event out. College does a great job in educating you, but I often feel like one of the areas that sometimes college falls a little bit flat on is helping you understand your money and helping you understand the importance of salary negotiation and what you should be thinking about when it comes time to get that job offer and how to dance essentially with the employer to get more. Stacey will talk at length about this, but the fact is you are worth way more than whatever that initial offer is. And I don't truly care if you've ever worked a day in your life, you deserve more than that initial offer. So we'll talk today about several steps to help you get there so that you feel confident when you're negotiating, so that you feel that you're negotiating for the right thing. And also that you understand some strategies where, hey, maybe money isn't what I negotiate for. Maybe there's something else. The fact is, all of that is great, but before you get there and can negotiate and look for a certain salary, you need to understand your own money that you have in hand already and or understand what you want your lifestyle to look like. Think of it this way. If you want to have a certain lifestyle, and let's say, for argument's sake, that your student loans are $1,000, right? That's on the very, very high end, but there are students where that's the case. Let's say your rent is $1,000. Let's say you have a car payment that is $500, right? You start adding these things together, you're like, wow, I already have $2,700 a month in expenses alone. Well, guess what? You need to know that in advance of going and negotiating for a salary. Because if your lifestyle commands a certain number, meaning 25, 27, 3,000, 3,500 a month, whatever it is, then negotiating for a job that may only pay 35 or 37,000 a year may not make a whole lot of sense for you, right? So understanding your money and budgeting and what you want your lifestyle to be is so crucial before you enter into the negotiation with an employer. So that's sort of what we're looking at here today. Now, I'm curious who, and Stacey, can you move forward? There you go. Awesome. And you can move forward one more. I'm curious, and if you can put your hand up in the chat, who in here actually budgets right now? You can put your hand up or.
Okay, we got a few.
Awesome. Now, if somebody, and I can't see who, we'll go with Katie. Katie, if you wouldn't mind sharing with the group here, what is it that made you decide to start making a budget? Was there a certain moment where you're like, man, I need to start keeping track of this stuff?
Yeah, I guess I didn't have a good idea of where my money was going. And I knew I wanted to be able to pay off my student loans. So I wrote it, I've got just a budget template online and kind of put my numbers in there to get a better idea.
I love it. And thank you, Katie, for that. So it doesn't have to be when you create a budget, right? Some people think it has to be some advanced software and I need to have all my calculators out, and it could be further from the truth, right? You can get a napkin at Maxie's and on the back of it, do your budget. I am just asking and pleading with you to please have an understanding of where your money goes each month. Have an understanding of what's coming in versus what's going out. Because look, I know I was there when I was your age as a college student, and some of you may have experienced this today. You go to 7-Eleven, you get a cup of coffee and maybe a bagel, and you just kind of cross your fingers hoping as you swipe your card at the ATM or at the cash register, man, I just hope there's a couple more dollars on here, right? I just hope there's some money to get me through. And we all know that's not really how we want to live our life. So again, taking a few moments, whether it be weekly or at the very least each month, to get an understanding of where you're at now, money-wise, what money came in, what money came out, is crucial. It's important. There's apps to do it. If you're using an app, drop it down in the chat. Let us know. I know there's quite a few. But you don't need some elaborate, expensive thing. As Katie mentioned, you can get all kinds of templates and Excel documents and stuff online for free. You don't have to pay for any of this stuff. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, looking at this slide here, these are some items when I do this presentation with my class and we talk about sort of what expenses I'll have post-graduation. This list here is what will often come about, right? And these are basic: rent, utilities, gas, insurance, food, whatever. There's a couple here I wanted to hit on and talk specifically about. Number one is subscriptions. Now, my wife would kill me if she knew I brought this up when I do budgeting, but I always do. These subscriptions, although they're relatively cheap, $8 for this, for Twitter, right? We're all subscribing to Twitter now, $8 to do that. If you're subscribing to YouTube or Spotify or whatever else it is that you may be subscribing to, you may think, well, this is only $4 here or $6 there, $9 there. It adds up, right? It adds up. So think about it, right? You got Netflix, you got Hulu, Amazon Prime, whatever else is out there, right? It just keeps adding up. So don't fall victim into the thing where you go, well, they're all relatively cheap. It's not bad. Yeah, on face value, they are, but you add them up, it costs a decent amount of money. All right, so be aware of that. Two other items here: student loans. Does anybody know when your student loans start knocking on your door? When do they start saying, pay me, pay me? Does anybody know? No, not graduation, a little longer than that. They're nice enough to give you a few more months. Does anybody know? When is it?
6 months after?
Yep, 6 months. Now, here's the thing, right? They don't care if you have a job, you don't have a job, you're really close to getting a job. They don't care. They want their money. So what I would encourage you all to do today or this week, even if you're not a senior, even if this is 3 years away for you, get in tune with what you're going to owe. You can talk to your loan handler. You can find out what your interest rate is or will be. You can find out what your estimated monthly payments will be. And you'll get a feel for, all right, if I know my student loan is going to be, let's say, $500 a month, which is sort of average now, right? Well, then I know if my rent's $800, my student loan's $500. I don't have a car, but I have car payment, but I have car insurance. You can start to build out what your budget will look like post-graduation. And that's crucial because then you can sit there and go, all right, for the lifestyle I want to live, I now know I'm going to need X number of dollars. Therefore, when I go to negotiate or when I go to look at jobs and look at the salaries, I know when I'm in the ballpark of what I want. And that's huge. I've seen far too many students. I've been doing this for 15 years now. I've seen far too many students who get into a spot where they want to live a certain lifestyle, but then the jobs they're looking at, they pay like $29,000, $30,000 a year, right? So it's kind of a mismatch there. It doesn't work. So getting in tune with your student loans, understanding 6 months after you graduate, you start to pay them back, right? One other item I want to say with student loans, we've seen over the last couple of months, Washington making some efforts to help alleviate student loan debt. And look, I think that's great. However, as we've also seen, that whole process of now some of your loans being forgiven and all, it's already been put to a halt. It's already been stopped. My point being, don't hang your hat on thinking somebody will take care of it at some point for you. Not saying that won't happen. It very well could happen next week, next month, 3 years, who knows? Fact is, don't sit there and think, well, they'll be taken care of, so I'm not going to worry about them now. Because, and I hope this never happens to you, but if you go bankrupt, the one thing that will never leave is your student loan. It will never leave, right, Stace? It's with you forever.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
So make sure you hang with that and know, like, hey, this is the thing I got to ensure that I continue to pay. And look, if you get into a trouble spot, right, you don't have a job, things aren't working out, whatever, talk to your loan handler. There are a few things worse than just, I'm going to hide and ignore those emails and or phone calls. Don't let that be you. Another item I want to talk about on the slide here is credit cards. Now, this may sound counterintuitive to all of you, but the fact is it's a good idea to get a credit card right now. Notice, I'm not saying get 3 or 4 credit cards and go wild with them. I'm saying get one credit card and showcase the potential lenders in the future, you know how to manage money. The rule of thumb is this: traditionally, you want to keep your credit use to limit ratio to less than 10%. So basically what you want to do is ensure that, let's say you have $1,000 as your credit card limit. Well, each month you want to ensure that you're not carrying anything more than $100 on that card or on that bill from month to month. In a perfect world, you do what? You pay the whole thing off. Again, I say perfect world because sometimes we're in situations we just can't do that, right? You know, I'm taking care of a loved one. I was in a car accident. I need to use my credit card to put food on the table for the people I live with. Stuff happens, right? So, you know, I am not trying to come from a privileged point of view here and saying this is what you always need to do. However, when you're in a situation and you can avoid it, using less than 10% is the way to go. Don't fall into this trap of thinking, well, I don't have a credit card, therefore I'm in a good position. Because what will happen is when you go and try and get loans, whether it be for a car, whether it be for a rent, whether it be for graduate school, they're going to see, yeah, you have no debt, but we also don't know if you know how to manage money, right? So that's important. Keep that in mind. Last thing I'll say about this slide, there's another debt option up here. When I was an undergrad, I ended up working at the Philadelphia Daily News as an intern. And one of the things I had to do was cover a boxing match down in South Philadelphia. And I'll never forget it. I had to get a laptop because the laptop I was using broke. It wasn't good. Well, you know, they were like $2,000 at the time, and I didn't have that money, and I wasn't going to ask my father for it. So I did the next best thing, or so I thought. I called up Uncle Dell and said, "Hello, Dell. What computers do you have for me, a college student with no money?" And they said, "Well, guess what, Patrick? We have a deal for you today." About 4 years later, I think I finally paid off that laptop that had about an interest rate of close to 30%. Foolish me, naive me, didn't think anything of it. And I just kept making the minimum payments each month of, I don't know, I guess $90, $100, whatever. My point being, if you can avoid it, don't get into picking up other debt. And if you have to, make sure you understand your interest rate. Make sure you understand, all right, the minimum payment's $100. I'm going to try my best to put $120 down so I can knock down this principal and pay this item off sooner rather than later. Huge, huge thing there. Any questions about what you see here on this budget category slide?
So much good info. And I'll also encourage people, if you want to raise your hand, unmute, of course, that's totally fine. But also questions, comments in the chat are always welcome. I see some folks have already said, you know, apps like Excel, Mint Mobile. I love Mint Mobile, by the way. I think it's great. So yeah, definitely keep those coming. And I'll also add on to that other debt category. Y'all have probably seen this thing called Afterpay that's become very popular with online shopping. So items that are not even that expensive, like maybe you have a $60 pair of shoes, you can get it for just $10, right? And then you have to pay for 6 months or however long the thing is. That falls under other debt too. So like large or small, just like what Patrick is saying, don't discount that because it really does build up over time.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Stacey. I've been seeing this wild thing where, you know, to buy this hat, let's say, or this shirt on Fanatics, right? And it's, I don't know, a $40 shirt, let's say. You could do it in 3 installments of $15.99. And it's like, hold on. If you need to put a shirt like that on an installment pay, that may be a sign to you, hey, I don't have the money to buy this right now.
Kind of a red flag.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a little bit different. You know, you're buying furniture, you're buying things that, you know, are large scale, or you're really, really in a desperate situation. But think about it, right? If it's something you don't need and you're getting on one of these, you know, I sold on QVC or I sold on Amazon and I can get real small monthly payments, think about it. You really, really need it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It seems small, but then you have to factor it in every single month, and it's just a burden you don't need, right? Unless it's an essential, of course, then that's a little bit different. But yeah.
So as if this number couldn't get any more in your face here. This isn't from the Pat Gordon School of Economics either. This is from Tony Robbins, Susie Orman, Warren Buffett. You talk to big time or read content from big time financial people. They recommend at all times putting 20% of your check away into savings, and that's what you should do to start to build a nest egg. Now, look, I am not a fool. I understand fully when life starts post-graduation, putting 20% away is difficult. Hell, I'm 39 years old. My wife and I make decent money. I'm not even sure we're putting 20% away every month, right? So in certain ways, this is sort of a pie in the sky number, but it's important for you to realize if you're sitting there today wondering, gee, I wonder how much money I should put away from my check. That number is 20%. And I didn't mention it, but if you go back to that last slide, Stacy, for a second, when I ask students what's included in your budget, notice what is not on the slide. It's savings. People don't think of it. They forget about it. It's like out the window. Keeping in mind that in the perfect world, you're running at a surplus every month, not a deficit, not at a zero, but at a surplus. Now, when you first start out, there's going to be some expenses that maybe you didn't think of, right? You're going to be sitting there in a situation where, right, you're living paycheck to paycheck. You got to buy all these nice suits and dresses for work. You got to outfit this new apartment I have, right? You don't want to be house poor. You don't want to have this nice apartment and then let's go sit on my white lawn chairs, right? You don't want that to be you. So again, this number is aspirational, all right? It's aspirational. Don't let it scare you. But I do believe it's extremely important that you're aware of this. 20% is the ideal number that experts say you should aim for when saving.
Yes, and I think it can be helpful to, at least I have found it helpful to have separate savings accounts for different things. So instead of putting everything like the emergency fund, the vacation savings, I don't know, if you have an event like a wedding or something that you want to do, then not having those different goals lumped into one account, because then it can feel like a little bit like you're setting away this money for no distinct purpose, but rather having these buckets, these accounts like separated so that you sort of feel like, okay, I'm actually making progress towards this specific goal. That has really helped me with being more motivated to save, because otherwise sometimes it feels like you're putting money aside, but it's for a rainy day and that rainy day never comes, right? So then you might eventually lose motivation to keep it going. So just being really clear with yourself, why am I saving? Like, what is this money going towards?
Yeah, and the other item too that's really important, that it takes a little bit longer. We'll get to that, Katie. I'll talk about that in a few moments. There's another item that from a savings perspective that you should be thinking about, but it's even more difficult for younger professionals to get to, and that's an emergency fund. And what you hear, again, Susie Orman, Tony Robbins, all these financial experts, they say an emergency fund should be approximately 6 months of your living expenses. And this is totally different than your savings account, right? Your savings account, you go in and out of every day, whatever. The emergency fund is supposed to be, as Stacy mentioned, a different fund that is sort of, I've lost my job, what do I do? The roof is blown off the house, what do I do? When people argue, well, insurance will take care of it. Has anybody dealt with an insurance company that's speedy and quick to do what they need to do? You usually got to front that money first, right? So again, that's another thing. It's a very, very big challenge for young professionals to even think of, right? Somebody mentioned in the chat, I'm just trying to live paycheck to paycheck here at first. That's true. I get that. Again, I just wanted to share this so that you understand, what's going on here.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I totally agree with that point about how it's aspirational. It's something to shoot for, but I did not have an emergency fund to speak of until several years after I graduated. And even then it's not like a 3 to 6 month super robust emergency fund, So yeah, definitely something that I think many of us are still kind of working towards.
Yes. I'm 39 and I think I still may be working towards it. So trust me, this is a work in progress, right? This isn't something you just fix overnight. So managing your cash, right? Know your expenses, know what's coming in, know what's going out. Understand your loans, right? There is no reason you're sitting here today and have a loan, yet I don't know anything about it. I don't know what it means. I don't know how much I owe, right? Take control of it. You're the driver of your life. You have to be in that captain seat. You can't let other people do it and you can't be rudderless. In turn, you need to know what's going on. So these loans that are big time debt, you got to be aware of, right? You got to be in tune with. Build credit, but be smart about it. Get that credit card. Notice again, I'm not saying get 3 credit cards and start racking them up at Barnes and Noble, but you want to definitely get a credit card. Now, this last bullet point, and Katie, this may go into what you were asking about with the high, the yield savings accounts and stuff. So understand retirement plans. Now you're probably sitting there going, man, I'm a sophomore. You're talking to me about retirement plans. Or I'm a senior. I'm not retiring for 50 years, right? Here's why this is important. If you're going to negotiate with an employer, you have to understand what the entire package includes from an employer. And there usually is a decent chunk of money that's affixed with retirement plans. The days of pensions, which are what most of our parents may have had or are living on now, they're usually gone. Most places don't offer pensions. They do offer 401ks or some form of a retirement account. And basically what this means is your employer contributes to your retirement, and they will either match, double, or put a certain percentage of whatever you're putting in into your retirement. And in turn, it's managed by Fidelity or TIAA-CREF or Schwab or one of these massive banks, right? Well, here's the problem sometimes. Younger people, and sometimes even older people, will be of the mindset, well, I'm not going to retire for 30 or 40 years, so therefore, I'm not going to care about retirement now. And it sort of sets a very bad precedent, because what happens is you contribute very little to nothing at retirement, right? When you're 21, 22, 23, 24, whatever. Well, guess what? If the employer matches what you put in and you're putting in 0, what's your employer putting in? 0. It's free money, essentially, that you're just saying, nah, I'm cool. I don't need it. Now, I understand sometimes you're in a position where, look, I need all the money I can get because I have a child I'm taking care of, or a loved one, or someone's sick. That's a different situation, right? I understand that. However, you want to ensure that if your employer offers you a match or a double like Temple does, which is rare, that you take advantage of it, that you have the ability to put money into it every other week or once a month or whatever it may be with your employer, and that's taken care of. I don't know if there's any econ or business students here, but you know compounding interest. You understand the stock market, how it normally goes up. This year is a different story. Although we've had a good run the last few days, but normally it goes up, right? And in turn, your money will also go up. Now, somebody mentioned about this being a good savings account. It's actually not 100% true. Your 401k isn't really viewed to be a savings account for a few reasons. One, it's highly taxed, meaning you can't necessarily access this money whenever you want. You can if you're vested with your employer, and depending on if it's a 401k or a 403b and all this different stuff. And also if it's if you're of a certain age or it's been in an account for a certain amount of time, even then you're going to get hit with massive tax. So although, again, worst case scenario, an emergency, yes, you can tap into it. It is strongly encouraged that you don't do it. For example, you cannot really pull out of your 401k for a mortgage. All right. It's highly advised against doing it because you're going to get taxed over the moon. All right. Now, here's the other reason why retirement plans are important. Stacy, you may agree with me on this. We will not get rich working at Temple University. We're just not. Like, we get paid well. We're not going to be rich. But you know what we do get working at Temple is a retirement package that is matched by nobody. Nobody doubles like Temple are putting money, doubling what you put in. Number two, you talk about health benefits. You talk about health benefits. You talk about tuition remission, right? The fact my son will go to school here for free. The fact I got a master's from here for free. You start taking all these things into consideration. And this is important. And Stacey will talk about this, I'm sure, with the salary aspect, right? You may look on paper and say, well, that place only pays $70,000 a year. Okay, yeah, $70,000, you're not, rich. But I'll tell you what, if their retirement plans are awesome, if their health and benefits are great, if they offer other benefits like tuition remission and stuff like that, you have to take that into consideration when you're comparing jobs from one organization to another, right? So again, don't just think, well, this place pays this and this place pays that, therefore the place that pays more, that's where I need to go. That is not the entire package, right? So again, in sort of a backhanded way, the retirement, the benefits, all of that, it really does matter when you're thinking about salaries and negotiations and all that.
110%. I think that oftentimes that number, the base pay, it seems like it can mean a lot in and of itself, right? Because we look at that and we think, okay, this is going to be my budget from this pay. This is the kind of food I can afford and the clothes and the et cetera, everything that was on that other slide. But yeah, these things like the tuition remission, the benefits, these get factored into your compensation, right? Like what Patrick is saying, the organization that you work for has a number for that. That is money, right? So that master's degree that you get for free, hypothetically, if you were to work at a higher ed institution, is worth nowadays $100,000 or even more, right? So thinking of it that way, not just it's this thing, but rather what is the monetary amount that's attached to that. And also just reiterating this point and really emphasizing the retirement thing, because I think I saw this chart once, and it was the compound interest graph showing how, if you invest $100 into your retirement account, nothing crazy, right? Like a relatively doable amount of money in a few months, then that same $100, if you invest it at age 22, becomes much, much, much more, right? As opposed to if you were to invest that same amount, but in your 40s or 50s, because
Right.
it simply hasn't had nearly as much time to compound and grow and multiply. So yeah, it's super great. And I think just you have the best thing on your side right now, which is time, to watch that grow and to do yourself that favor in the future.
Yeah, I can't. Stacy's 100% right. I mean, you don't ever want to find yourself in a position of. So I know people that have done this. Thankfully, I didn't. I was very lucky. My father had some people that were smart with money. Said, "Hey, here's what you need to do." But I know a lot of people, sadly, who thought, "Well, hold on, I'm not retiring for 40 or 50 years or ever." Some people say that, right? And so, in turn, I want all the money now, and so I'm not going to put money into retirement. Well, guess what? Now they're 35 years old with children and a mortgage and a car payment. And, all of a sudden now they've gotten used to having that extra money that should be going to a 401k or retirement. And now they don't have the ability to pull money back, right? They don't have the flexibility to say, all right, I now will take $300 or $400 less per month in my check to put into retirement, because they've gotten comfortable on what their take home pay is now. And so in turn, they've not only given up, say, 5 or 10 years of compounding interest, which is massive in the long run, they've also now put themselves in that really difficult spot of getting comfortable with a take-home check that really is more than what they should really be bringing home, because they're not putting anything into retirement. So again, while you're young and can, get acclimated, get used to that idea of, hey, I'm putting a couple $100 a month or $100 a month, whatever it may be, into that retirement. It's huge. It's going to help me. So that's important.
For sure.
So a couple other things to consider here, right? Take risks while you're young. And again, I'm very aware. I don't want this to sound like it's coming from a privileged situation. And I know this isn't necessarily for everybody, right? However, think about it. If you're 22, 23 years old, and you don't have any anchors, meaning a child, a loved one that has to stay here in the area, a family member you're taking care of, if you're just the average traditional college student who, yeah, I got some debt, but I have some flexibility on my hands as well, now's the time to take some risks in things that you could explore as potential careers, dreams you have, things you want to go after. You want to be an actress, you want to start a band, you want to start a business, whatever it is, now's the time to do it. Because look, when you get to be my age, I'm 39, you're even at the age of 30, right? It gets a bit more challenging. I can't necessarily go home to my wife and say, hon, I want to do this, and I'm going to quit Temple and quit my side hustle business because I want to now become a painter, right? Yeah, she would support me, I hope. But she also made me thinking, what is going on here? How's this going to work? If I'm 20 years old and it's just me and I don't have the other anchors, quote unquote, it's a lot easier to try some stuff, right? I want to go to Europe. I want to do this. I want to do that. Think about it this way too. All right. I was listening to something from Tony Robbins a couple of days ago, and it's this idea of a rocking chair concept. If you're sitting in a rocking chair and you're 90 years old, right? Are you going to sit back there and wish that you took advantage of some situations or experimented with something or tried something out when you were in your 20s? And if you think you're going to sit in that chair and regret not doing it, then now's the time to do it, right? So think that through, right? If there's something you want to try, if there's something you want to do, if there's a business you want to create, there's a thing that you want to go after, Even if you fail and fall flat, so what? You're now what, 25 years old? You still have a ton of time left. And think about it this way too, right? Say you start a small business and it falls and you don't make any money. Assuming you do it right and you don't put a ton of money into it, right? And you got to, all right, I got to enter the job market. I got to go and interview and do some stuff and get my career on track. When you interview, right? And that employer asks you, tell me about a time you had to overcome adversity, or tell me about a time where you dealt with a difficult situation. Man, you're going to have a lot of stuff to pull from at that point. And it's going to be a much more sincere, authentic, real answer than just talking about when you were a senior in college and you had a really difficult class, right? So think that through. If there's something you want to do, something you're passionate about, and that goes into these next two bullets here, having a side hustle, right? And this idea of entrepreneurship. The side hustle thing is so important. Think about it. If there's something you enjoy, there's something you like doing, whether it's creating arts and crafts on Etsy, whether it's baking cupcakes, whether it's photography at a wedding, whether it's DJing, whether it's flipping shoes on eBay, find something that you enjoy that can generate another form, another line of income. Think about it this way, right? I don't know if anybody here worked in the food or restaurant industry or was working in a bar when COVID happened. But if you were and you only had that one form of income, it's gone and the spigot closed, right? Now, I'm not saying you would have been able to live life off of flipping shoes on eBay, but if you had that second income, right? And even if it was just a little bit of money coming in, that's better than no money, right? So again, if there's something you're passionate about, something you enjoy, something that's easy for you to do, right? Take advantage, continue to do it. And then lastly here, money should not drive your decision-making process. And we talked about this a little bit with the benefits from your different jobs and such. Look, I would much rather see you make $50,000 a year and do something you enjoy than make $80,000, but really hate pulling in that parking lot every day, right? You pull in and you're like, man, I'm here again. I got to see these people. I got to do this and do that. If you're in that position more than 5% of the time, that's probably a sign, hey, it may be time for me to leave and do something else. Don't let money decide or dictate your future. Now, again, there are the rare occurrences. I have a loved one I need to take care of. I have a sick child. Yeah, I'm going to take the job that pays me more money to make sure my son or daughter is in a healthier position. Respect. I understand that. All things being equal, though, right? Don't let money be the only thing deciding, the only decider with regard to what position you take.
Yeah, for sure. I think all of these things, they're kind of connected in a way, and particularly how the side hustle allows you that freedom, right? To not just be so fixated on this one thing. Patrick is one of the best side hustlers I've ever met. Not just doing it like as a brief sort of dabbling here and there, but being consistent with it, seeing it grow is really awesome. And yeah, I've had experiences like that myself. When I was unemployed after I graduated, I went thrifting, and then I would flip the clothes that I thrifted. And that was something I did for a few months. And it was a really good learning experience, but also allowed me to generate that income and support myself. So really recommend that. We have a question in the chat. Patrick, what are your side hustles?
So Stacey's too kind. I run a baseball publication outside my time here at Temple. So I've been, or I am credentialed by Major League Baseball. I'm down in Citizens Bank Park several times a week. Was just that, covering the World Series as press, which was awesome. But I also do a lot of coverage of college and high school baseball in the Philadelphia area. I've been doing this since 2006. I worked briefly at the Philadelphia Daily News in the sports department. Baseball has always been part of my life, and I'm blessed to have the skills to write. So both my degrees are in journalism. I teach or have taught in the journalism program. And I was able to, like I'm telling you all, the side hustle. I'm passionate about writing. I'm passionate about baseball. I'm passionate about growing the game in the Philadelphia area amongst the amateur level. And I just enjoy being in the clubhouse, being around the game, the sport. It reminds me of my time with my father growing up. Like, it's just in my DNA. And so I'm very blessed and lucky to do that while also doing what I love here now at Temple, which is motivating, inspiring, and helping you all reach your goals and dreams. So I'm a very lucky individual with what I get to do. And Stacey's a big part of that because the team I'm with is awesome.
I agree. We have a great team. And yeah, we all kind of have like our own thing, our own like perspective on this. But yeah, I think we would all agree, money should not drive your decision making. It should be, I see so many people, so many students who ultimately do something that they think looks good on paper, or they do it for the money, and then you kind of regret that, right? So yeah, all of this is just super key. And I think, do you want to go into the credit score or?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So quickly, because I don't want to impede on with Stacy's time with the negotiation piece, but this is something everybody should know. Just like I was saying a few moments ago about your student loan and knowing your percentage and all that, right? The other thing everybody should know is your credit score. And there's a couple ways to find this out. One, and probably the most popular amongst college students, is Credit Karma. It's free to set up an account, and you can see sort of what your credit score is. I think students tell me the Discover credit card also gives you your credit score each month. There's probably some other websites, and again, drop them in the chat if you're aware of any, where you can get your credit information. Why is it important? Well, it's important for a few different reasons. One, if your credit score, this is one of those rare charts where red is better than green. If your credit score falls to the red side, right, you're going to get better interest rates, better APR, better terms of a loan. It's going to help you save money in the long run. So when you need to go to Mealy's or Raymore and Flanagan, let's say, and get a line of credit to outfit your home, your interest rate's probably not going to be too brutal, right? Same thing, you try and get a car payment or a bank loan to pay for grad school, things will be on your side. Now, if you're falling to the left, that doesn't mean that your life is over necessarily, or that you're never going to get back to the red. It just means you may miss some payments along the way. Maybe you just have been ignoring a few phone calls or emails. Odds are, if you fall to the left with your credit score, you're going to be in a position where you'll just get less favorable loan information, loan details. Now, the reason I talk about this isn't so that you all can compare scores. It's so that you know, A, where you can find your credit score, right? Again, Credit Karma, some of your credit card handlers may have it on your statements, that sort of thing. But also B, so that you can check your credit report and see, is everything on there like it should be? Here's an example. Let's say you go and you're getting a mortgage, your first mortgage, let's say. You found a beautiful home. The process to get pre-approved is where they run your credit score. They run your credit score. You think you're in good shape because you haven't missed a payment. You have lines of credit. You've been doing things the right way. You have money in the bank, but you've never looked at your credit score. What happened is when they pull your credit, they see your credit score is in the tank. You then go ahead and look and see, wait, somebody opened up an account and bought all kinds of, let's say, aquarium equipment. And now I'm, according to my credit score, $16,000 in debt because somebody opened up a credit card or two that I do nothing about. That's a big problem, right? And I don't know if anyone here has dealt with credit theft or fraud. It isn't an easy fix. It's not like, oh, it wasn't you, don't worry about it then, right? This takes time to fix. And in turn, your credit score just sits in limbo. So my point being, it's not bad policy on your end. Check your credit score, check your credit report a couple times a year. You don't need to do it monthly or weekly or anything like that. Check it occasionally, though. Make sure what's on there makes sense. Because if it doesn't and something's on there that's a miss, you got to take care of it as soon as possible. You don't want it to just continue to grow into a bigger, worse situation. We can skip this one, Stace. This is just how your credit score is figured out.
Mhm.
So there's this resource here that you all are eligible to use, and this is through Temple. If you go on the TU portal, there's an option for cost and aid. And on there, it'll take you to this link where it's called iGrad, where it'll take a look and see how much money you likely will owe on your student loan post-graduation. It'll talk about what your monthly payments could be. It's a good tool. I'm not saying this is the be-all, end-all. It's a good tool, though, especially if Temple has all the information about your student loans on hand.
Mhm. Yeah, it is a pretty good resource. And I've seen some of their courses have also been pretty useful. So if you are interested in learning more beyond the session, you can go in iGrad and take some of the courses. They have like a financial self-assessment that you can take, and it'll evaluate your financial health. So yeah, it's a pretty good tool. All right, and I think now we are transitioning into salary negotiation, but before we do that, does anyone have questions related to any of this stuff, financial literacy, budgeting, credit scores, literally anything under the sun that Patrick covered. Patrick, do you have anything that you want to add before we move on?
No, just it's a very personal exercise, right? And the way one person may do their budget is totally different and maybe not as detailed as somebody else may. And look, that's okay. What works for one may not work for another. I just think it's an extremely important thing that you all get in tune with where your money's at, where it's coming in, where it's going, what your subscriptions are, what your debt looks like, and that you're realistic about where you're going. You know, if you're carrying a lot of debt and you're heading out into the working world, you may be in a situation where what Stacey's going to talk about here, the negotiation aspect, you may have to negotiate harder. Stacey's going to talk about something called a resistance point. Listen to that. That's really important. She's going to talk about why you need to all have a resistance point, right? So again, this is just, it's valuable information. And sadly, I don't think college talks enough about this sort of stuff that's so real world and practical. So I'm glad you're here, and I'm hanging around still. I'm going to be here the entire time. So if there's any time for Q&A at the end, please reach out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. I think these two things, they're very related, right? Like Patrick said, it's not just like you negotiate your salary in isolation of your budget or your financial situation, but these two things actually really go hand in hand. And one more thing that I'll add, because I think it was Rosalie who said in the chat, yes, it was Rosalie who plugged Mint Mobile, the app, in the chat. And I will just put another shout out or another highlight on that, because that point Patrick just made about how, you really want to, first of all, understand where you are financially and where your money is going before you can even start to put together a budget and understand like how you should be allocating things. Because before I downloaded Mint, I sound like a commercial. Before I downloaded Mint, my life was in shambles. But before I downloaded Mint, I didn't really know where my money was going. I was like, yeah, I'm spending some money eating out, but I really had no idea how much exactly it was over the course of a month. And then this app, it allows you to connect all of your cards. So if you have a Discover card, a Chase card, a bank account with Capital One or something, like all of these disparate accounts that are sort of all over the place, they get streamlined into Mint, and it tells you at the end of every month how much you spent, how much money in all of your cards, not just one, and then how much you had coming in through savings and checking and all of that. And it gives you the big picture with your spending in your categories. So instead of thinking like, yeah, I probably spend 100 or so every month eating out, I was able to see like, wow, I'm spending like 3 times that much. I had no idea. So that is a really great tool to help you see the big picture. And then, all these other resources like iGrad, like just Excel, and making sure that you're on top of it with your budget, will help you in that direction. So now transitioning into salary negotiation. Also, as a heads up, I think the session will probably end around 3:30. So I'll try to wrap up before then if anyone has questions. But yeah, I think we're going to try to go till around 3:30 or 3:20, around then. So when it comes to salary negotiation, I think there are a few things that I just really want to highlight. But before I do that, I want to ask all of you, when it comes to negotiating your salary, your benefits, what do you see as your biggest challenge? Like when you think about hypothetically in your next or first full-time job, having that conversation with someone who is maybe your hiring manager or the recruiter, the HR person, like what do you see as being the challenge or the source of anxiety? Feel free to just drop those in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand, unmute yourself, please feel free to do that as well. All right, I see Kenny said confidence. I think that's a really huge one. Kenny, would you be okay with elaborating a little bit more and sharing what exactly you mean by confidence?
Sure. I guess it's just the fact that like I don't know like how much like you're allowed to negotiate. I don't know like how far you're allowed to push, and just like I guess like I know like the question they like to say is like how much you're worth. Like I don't really know how to calculate all of that and see if like, oh, I can ask for more or ask for less, or if I'm asking for too much. And like fear that that might risk losing the job offer altogether.
Mm, mhm. Thank you for sharing that. And I mean, if anyone else feels that way, feel free to put up a hand or, say it in the chat. But I know for me as an undergraduate student, I definitely felt that way. How do I even know what number I should be giving to this person in this negotiation? I see Katie's thumbs up. How do I know my quote unquote worth, right? What does that even mean? And furthermore, what if I negotiate and then they end up not liking me to this point in the chat? What if they potentially even rescind the offer and take it away from me because they don't like the way that I negotiated, or they view me as being entitled or something? These are all very legitimate fears and concerns, and all of them we're going to address today. So how to determine that number, how to know what your worth is in this role, not of course in a actual existential level, but just on a purely salary based level. And then also tackling this question of how, will they like me? Will it affect their perception of me? I guess I'll just say, to kind of kick us off with that point, it's really, really expected. I think there was a survey where around 80% of employers, they said that they expect people to negotiate. And 80%, it's a pretty high number, right? So with that, it might even be perceived as a little bit not weird or strange, but a little bit of a, something that they notice if you don't negotiate. So that's something to keep in mind as well. It's very normal. It's very expected, at least in American culture, for most full-time jobs, most companies. And there are exceptions to that, of course. Like, I think if you're working for a position that's like a temporary position and they have like a stipend that they're giving you, then maybe it doesn't make sense to negotiate that stipend because it's dictated by like a federal grant or something. But, that does happen. Even though that might be the case, though, you can always negotiate on other things. Like Patrick said, there are all kinds of benefits that you can ask about, all sorts of features of your work, like maybe being able to work on a hybrid basis, working remotely, as opposed to coming into the office every day. So there's countless things that you can negotiate on. It's not just salary. All right. Does anyone else have any challenges or concerns, thoughts that they want to share when it comes to negotiation before we move into the presentation? All right. Well, if anything comes to mind, like we said, definitely feel free to just share, put it in the chat, or you can save it to the end and we will do a little bit of Q&A. I think we definitely should have time. So when it comes to salary negotiation, I think there are definitely some things that you want to keep in mind before going into it and understanding, how the technique or the strategy that you should be employing can be used to get you closer to where you want to be. So like Patrick said throughout the presentation, I think it's really important, first of all, to just come in knowing that you are expected to negotiate, and also you are negotiating so that you can have the kind of financial life that you want and that you are able to support yourself, basically, right? So that is always going to be at the forefront. It's not that you're saying this necessarily to the recruiter or to the hiring manager that you're talking to. Like, you're not saying, hey, I need $60,000 instead of 55 because I need to be able to live a certain kind of lifestyle, right? Like, no, I'm not saying that, but more so just sort of keeping that in front of your mind, front and center, and coming up with a budget, understanding your loans, understanding your financial needs, and then going forward. So when it comes to what you might actually say, or the things that you would present to a hiring manager, to a recruiter, whoever you're having this conversation with, these are the 4 points that you want to keep in mind. You want to know your value, you want to know your target salary and your benefits, you want to know your strategy, and then, like everything related to the job search, like the interview, you want to practice. You don't want this situation to be the first time where you're ever practicing negotiating and running those words over. So that's also something, even though I think it's less common, that's something that you can set up an appointment to meet with me or Patrick about. I have coached some students through salary negotiation and had that conversation with them. So, definitely feel free to reach out if that's something you need help with. One other thing I'll say too is that students will sometimes ask, should I negotiate over email, is that okay? Like if they offer me the job via email, should I just respond in the email or should I have this, over the phone? And my response is, and I don't know if Patrick has thoughts on this as well, but my response always is you want to negotiate over the phone, because over email, it's just ripe for miscommunication. You're waiting for them to reply. There's a lag, and it's just so much better to have it over the phone. But Patrick, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. One of the things that I often tell students is once you get that, first off, relax, right? You get that phone call, it's the employer calling you back. You have a feeling it's good news. Don't answer the phone. I know, again, that sounds counterintuitive. Had too many students answer the phone while they're in line at ShopRite or something, right? That's not really the time to talk. Wait until you're comfortable. Wait until it's your time. Then answer the phone or let it go to voicemail and you call them back, right? Number one. Number two, have them make the offer to you. Try as best you can to stay even keel. Don't just be thrilled. Yes, somebody wants me. I'm going to take this position. No, don't take that mentality, right? What you want to do is say, this is great. Can I have 48 hours or 3 days to look over this, to do my research and get back to you, right? I want to look things over. And this is where the rubber hits the road, right? You do all the things Stacey's going to educate you on here. You look into what are people paid for this position on average. What does the cost of living look like with regard to where I'm going to be working? What do I want my lifestyle to look like, right? Does this organization check off all the boxes for me? And here's where you really do all that research. So again, traditionally, email to me is like a foreign concept of trying to negotiate. I would never try and do it over email because, yes, as Stacey said, too many things can be misconstrued. The tone may be strange and odd. And yeah, I wouldn't want to negotiate via email or via text. I know that's different because this generation is, you enjoy that stuff. You'd rather probably not talk to a person. But the fact is, this is one of those situations where you want to speak to a person. And yeah, it may be uncomfortable. And that's where Stacey and I can help because we role play, right? We'll do this all the time with students on a regular basis. Well, no, we're not going to offer you that. We're going to offer you this. Well, how do you counter that? What do you say? What do you do? Right? So that's important to know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And as someone who is part of this generation, I will confirm, I also do not love speaking over the phone. I would rather do an email. But yeah, just reiterating that this is something where you definitely do want to take the time to do it over the phone, to practice and to just treat it like a conversation, right? So this is really important. This is not a confrontation or a battle that you're having where there are two sides who need to win or dominate the other. It really is just a professional conversation that you're having with this other person. Each side wants their own kind of thing, but at the same time, you both want the same thing, which is you want you to be working at this organization. So remembering that it's really just seeing where the two of you can meet in the middle. It's not a confrontation or an argument. It's really just, seeing how you can both get your needs met, and remembering that the employer really wants you. Otherwise, they wouldn't have given you this offer. So keeping all of that in mind, hopefully that empowers you to enter this negotiation, enter this whole discussion, knowing that you have the cards in your hand. You have the leverage here. You actually have more leverage here than you will at any other point in the hiring journey or in your job journey, because once you accept the offer, then that leverage kind of goes away, right? So when preparing for your negotiation, the first step is to know your value. And the way that you do that is by going back to your resume. So these things, the resume, the cover letter, the interview, they're all kind of interconnected, and they all are just different ways for you to express your qualifications, your skills, your traits, what makes you an excellent fit for that job, just over and over again, right? So this is an opportunity for you to revisit those skills and those abilities that got you hired in the first place. What is that job wanting from you? What is it about your qualifications that made you their number one choice? So I would go back to your resume, look at your accomplishments, think about the accomplishments that you mentioned during the interview, and make a note of some of those on an index card or in your notes app on your phone, wherever. Just a few to sort of get your thoughts going around what you bring to the table. And that really leads me to this point, which is that you are your own brand. So nobody is going to do this for you, even though, like I said before, the vast majority of employers actually expect you to negotiate. They're not going to tell you that they have set aside additional money above what they're offering you. So if they offer you $50,000 a year, they're not going to say, by the way, we actually have set aside 58 for you. You know what I mean? They want you, but they also want to bring you in as or they want to bring you in at a relatively affordable, for them, price point, because they want to try to pay you a little bit less and you want to get a little bit more. So remembering that, and remembering that it's your job to advocate for yourself, I think is really, really key here. And you're the only one who is going to be able to articulate your experiences and your qualifications. No one else is going to do it for you or go on your LinkedIn and do that work. You have to come prepared and just be ready to continue to do that as you've done throughout the entire process. So keeping that in mind, I think is really, really key. And then from there, you want to take those accomplishments, those achievements that you've highlighted from your resume and throughout, and to really put them into this formula here, which will allow you to articulate your value. So this is basically a framework that allows you to say, what your accomplishments were. So I accomplished, in this case, maybe I'll say, I accomplished developing a new program for our organization using my collaborative skills across departments and across functions, which benefited our company by increasing participation in human resources programs and classes by 30% this year. Whatever the thing was, I just made that up off the top of my head as an HR type of example. But in whatever type of work that you did, even if it's not directly in the field that you're applying for now, if it was maybe in an internship or in a volunteer experience, in a student org, that you were in, whatever the thing is, you can use this framework to articulate your results. And always just remember that you come in to the job world, the full-time world, with experience under your belt. Almost none of you are starting off at zero. So whether it was, an internship or a part-time job that you had, or other things that you did like projects, those all count as time and as experience. So you should be articulating your value accordingly, not thinking that those things don't count. I think that's a really big mistake and a really big trap that students fall into, and that I kind of fell into myself at one point. When I was a senior or a junior, I was kind of thinking like, oh, I don't really have that much experience, like who's going to hire me? But then going back and remembering, oh, actually, there's been a lot of things, right? And these things are all valid, and they all have allowed me to gain, skills and deliver results. So once you go through that exercise and you become really clear on, not a super long list of accomplishments, but I'd say around 4 or 5, you just want to have some, and then maybe identify 1 or 2 that are the strongest. This is when you, going back to Kenny's question, want to identify your target salary and your benefits. And the way that you do that is through researching. So this is the part where I'm sure many of you will have your questions answered and figure out how to identify that number. So the 6 steps to doing this are to research and identify either your exact job title or a comparable job title. Sometimes there are many different titles that mean basically the same thing. For the entry level, it's usually coordinator, specialist, those kinds of roles that are not like managing others or supervising others, but just sort of directly doing whatever the thing is. And so, there can be variations of that, but recognize that it's all basically the same thing at the end of the day. And then the second one is you want to find the salary range and establish your target salary for, that position. And then with that, you can then identify your target salary range. So the way that you do that, and I'll talk about this a little bit more later, but as Patrick said before, you want to think about your resistance point. This is the point at which you will walk away from the negotiation because you quite simply cannot make it work financially on any less than that. And the point where, stretching up from that resistance point, that lowest possible point, the point where you ideally want to shoot for, the higher end of your range. So I'll go into that a little bit more and how you actually do that, but that's kind of the gist of how to identify your target salary range. And, with that, to help you do that, we have points 4 and 5, as we've said, creating a realistic budget, and then, using that to determine that your resistance point, the point in which it really just doesn't make sense for you to take this job, right? And I think it's really important to have this, because sometimes we might tell ourselves, okay, it's better to have a job than no job, right? Any job is better than none. But I think that while that can be the case, if you're in dire financial straits and you just need something to get you by, I have totally been there myself and just have had to accept a job in order to pay rent and make things work. If you have, the flexibility or the option of walking away, then you really do want to, remember that you can find other opportunities. And it is not, this offer is not the end all be all. You know what I mean? Like especially when you're first starting out, might feel like, oh my gosh, this is such a, such a rare and precious thing. And it feels very new. But remembering that it's okay to walk away, it's okay to say no, because you deserve better. And ultimately, if the company is undervaluing you that much, being honest with yourself and asking you that question of do I even want to be here? Should I take this offer with an organization that does not value my worth, And then, of course, number 6, assessing the value of benefits. Super, super important, and have a whole other slide just for that. So in terms of how you actually do this research and you actually, find out what the range is, I personally really like salary.com. There are a lot of different places on the internet where you can look up salary ranges, like Glassdoor, those are more so self-reported, or you can go on different government websites like the Labor of Employment Statistics or the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and find those numbers. But I personally like salary.com because it has the widest range of salary, jobs and things available. And also the number, it just tends to be more accurate due to where they get their data from. So this screenshot is exactly what salary.com looks like. So as you can see here, this is where you would put your job title or a keyword related to your job and the location. As Patrick alluded to before, the location is super important because the cost of living will fluctuate a lot depending on your location. So if you're in a place like New York City, the same job is going to probably pay you much, much more than if you were in Omaha, Nebraska, So really crucial to put that in. For those of you who are in Philly and probably thinking of staying in Philly, I think Philly is definitely one of the more affordable cities to live in. So in one way, that's really nice because you don't have to pay as much in rent and things like that. But the other thing to keep in mind is that sometimes the jobs that your friends have who might be living in more expensive cities will pay more, whereas in Philly they may pay slightly less. So just something to keep in mind. When you actually put that job into salary.com, this is what will come up. You'll see the job title, you'll see some of the other terms for that job. So as I said before, these titles, they are basically interchangeable. And then you have some of the requirements and responsibilities. So you can double check and make sure this is actually your job and what you are searching for. And then this is how you set that target salary range. So the way that you do that is by scrolling down, looking at the bell curve that you see for this particular job, and using this public relations specialist 1 position as an example, you'll see that the median annual salary for this job in the city is $49,000 and some change a year. And that is the median, so it's right in the middle. And then you have the 75th and the 25th percentile, which are 58 and 44 respectively. So looking at this, you kind of want to think, okay, the median is about 50, almost 50, and median is in the middle. So as an employee that is above average, right, that is not just middling quality, but is amazing and stellar and all of those things, because you are that, right? Like you got this job offer, you clearly are a cut above the rest. You should, in my opinion, start at the median as your kind of baseline. So for this example, using this bell curve as an example, I might think of a range of around, 50 at the lowest to 58. I think that's pretty reasonable. It's the 50th to the 75th percentile for this role. Now, when you're looking at the range and you're coming up with your salary range of, around maybe 5,000 to 8,000 or 10,000, you want to start with your target salary and then stretch upward. So going back to that prior example, if, I'm looking at this, and if it makes sense for my budget, of course, and all of the calculations that I've done for the kind of life I want to live, if my lowest point is 50 and my highest point is 58, that kind of means that my target salary is closer to 50. And the reason for that is because when you're in that negotiation, the person who you're talking to is always going to try to work you down. They're never going to say, oh yeah, like you want between 55 and 58, I'm going to give you 58, or even if you give them a straight up number and say, oh, 58, very, very rarely, almost never are they going to just be like, yeah, sure, 58. They're almost always going to say, actually, the highest I can give you right now is 56, right? They're always going to try to work you down. So keep that in mind. And that's why you want to sort of start off with your target salary on the low end of things, so that when they work you down, it's sort of, not leaving you in a place where you're unhappy. And then going back to this term, the resistance point, you want to be able to think to yourself, and again, just identify at what point it makes sense for you to walk away from this conversation, to, decline the job because it just doesn't make sense for you financially. I think, thinking back to some of my early job searching and, my first endeavors into this, I think one of my biggest failures, I suppose, was the failure to determine a resistance point, because it really sucked to have to realize after taking a job, like, oh wait, this is not going to work for me financially. And then after a couple of months, frantically searching for a new job and being in that, sort of cycle. So I think that when you are clear on this, it is super, super helpful in the long run, even though, it can be hard. And I'm not saying it's easy, right? I'm not saying it's like, oh yeah, sure, I'll just turn this job down. But just again, being honest with yourself and putting yourself first, when you are doing your math, and figuring out what salary makes the most sense for you, I also think it's super important to factor in taxes, because remember, the number that they give you for your compensation is not what you are actually going to be taking home. Most of you have worked, most of you already know this. So you want to factor in about 25% of your gross income. Thank you, Leah, for your kind words. And also remember that there are resources out there to help you calculate this on a more granular level. So smartasset.com is really, really great for this. They also have a student loan calculator that's really helpful too. But Smart Asset will allow you to put in your your gross pay, which is what the company is giving you. And then it will factor in not only federal taxes, but also local, state. So if you live in Philly, you'll have to pay the Philadelphia tax. And it's just really, really helpful with giving you that clear picture. So once you factored in your taxes and you sort of know, okay, how much am I actually going to be taking home? How much do I have to work with in terms of my budget? You also want to consider the benefits. And this is, I think, a really helpful slide. So if you want to take a picture of it or a screenshot of it, this is where you can kind of see all the different areas, not even all the different areas, honestly, but a bunch of the different areas where you have the ability to negotiate and to ask for adjustments that are beyond just your salary. So some of the big ones on here that I just want to highlight are professional development down here on the left. It's not something that I think first timers tend to think of when they think of benefits. Like we usually think of healthcare and what Patrick was saying earlier, your 401k, your retirement. But especially when you're first starting off and you're, maybe a bit younger and still gaining that experience, professional development in the form of having your company fly you out to a conference in your field and being able to network, or being able to take classes, right? Whether it's at a university or to gain some kind of certification that's relevant in your field, your company will often give you money for that, which is incredible, right? Because you would be paying thousands and thousands of dollars out of pocket for those opportunities yourself. So that is definitely something that I would ask for, and that most organizations are happy to give to you if they're a good company and they value your growth, which, you're their employee, so they really should. And it's a really easy way to kind of like bump up your negotiation without having to talk about salary per se. Another thing that can be really important, that's not, I don't think it's listed on here, is the ability to work remotely if you want, especially now in this COVID or I don't want to say post-COVID, but COVID impacted world where a lot of people have become accustomed to that. And it's much more normal to say, hey, can I work from home 1 or 2 days a week instead of having to come into the office every day? So that might be something that your employer is willing to give you and, can kind of make your life a little bit closer to what you want it to be. In addition to that, I think some of these things, like sick, personal, parental leave, vacation time, these are forms of compensation that are not necessarily monetary, but it's more so in the form of time or, time off. Remembering that that is a form of compensation too in a different way. So you're not getting money, but as I said before, when Patrick was talking about getting a free master's degree, getting a really, really good healthcare plan, you want to think of it as much as you can in terms of dollars and in terms of what it gives you. So when it comes to like additional time off, remembering that your paid time off is paid, right? Like that is additional, it's not being given to you in the form of money, but if you calculate how much you earn in a day, that's kind of what they're giving you, but you don't have to work. So trying to think of it that way, trying to think of how you can get your employer to budge on certain things or to give you different benefits that just make the most sense for your situation. So not saying you need to go down this list and hit every single point and try to ask them for this, but if you have to move, maybe it makes sense to ask them for some relocation expenses, right? Stock options if it's a public company. So just be smart, as I know you all are, and try to think about what makes the most sense for your situation and where you can maybe in some of these areas get your employer to offer you something a little bit extra. Once you have done all of that, a lot of research, a lot of reflecting, and a lot of just thinking to yourself and becoming really clear, this is when you actually put it into practice. And so these are just some tips for entering your negotiation conversation. I think most of this has already been said before, but you want to bring your notes into the conversation. You want to remain positive and flexible. Remember, it's not a battle, it's a conversation. And then I think this fourth point about not getting personal is kind of interesting, but is worth mentioning because it's not as though you are negotiating so that you can, express to them that you have loans and that you really need this extra $5,000 that you can afford to pay your student loans. You know what I mean? So always try to keep those personal reasons, those personal thoughts out of it. And remember, you're just being clear, you're being objective, you are using the data. So the salary data, what's standard for your industry and your specific location, and then also your skills and qualifications that you bring. So it's not personal at all. It is purely professional. And so you want to keep that stuff out of this. You also want to remember that your employer has picked you. So they really want to make it work. I feel like this cannot be repeated enough times. Like they really, really do not want to go back to their second or third option or potentially even have to start this whole hiring process over again, right? Like they, just as you have invested time, have invested energy into this. And so they really are wanting this to work. And so for that reason, you shouldn't be scared of them rescinding the offer or taking it away. I honestly have never heard of that happening within a professional role. So it's really not something to be scared of. I think as long as you go into the conversation professionally and willing to just express good faith, then it's going to go well. And worst case scenario, if they can't give you anything, like they can't budge on the finances due to some sort of budget situation or whatever the case is, at least you know that you tried, right? At least you have that peace of mind knowing that you didn't leave money on the table and that you did your best. And I think that's something to be proud of. The worst feeling is knowing that you could have negotiated, but deciding not to out of fear or out of some sort of just, concern of judgment, some anxiety. And so I think that, you don't want to carry that with you into the job thinking, wow, I could have been making like 5K more or however much more, but I just wasn't brave enough to ask for it, right? Like I have been in that situation myself and it really does suck, the feeling. So just, knowing that you tried and that you did what you had to do and giving you that peace of mind, I think is definitely a reward in and of itself. With that too, you also want to try your best to deflect questions related to your salary expectations before the actual offer is given to you, right? Remember that all of this happens within the context of after you are officially given the offer and all the details are laid out. So if this were to hypothetically happen like prior to that point, maybe during the interview, I would just politely deflect and say, I'm really comfortable with a appropriate salary for this role that reflects the market rate and my qualifications, but I do need to learn more in order to determine a range, something along those lines where you're not just dismissing the question, but you're politely deflecting and sort of, requesting some more time to think about it and to learn. So yeah, I think after that, this is really just the gist of it. You want to remember that when you have the job, like Patrick said before, you don't just want to excitedly accept and be like, yes, I accept, without even hearing the terms or hearing what the offer includes. It can be a trap that some people can fall into. So just being aware of that, maybe not picking up the phone, or just like being very mindful when you pick up the phone to listen and to take notes, right? And then also, of course, getting it in writing. If it is a phone call and the recruiter calls you, you want to make sure that you have the offer in writing, because otherwise it's not an offer, right? It's someone sort of saying that you have an offer. So I'm going to, I think this is pretty much it. I'm going to briefly go over these last couple of slides just so that people have some context, but I do want to open it up to questions soon. So this is just to give you a little bit of a picture for how the entire job search lifecycle looks. So remember, the negotiation process is not the end all be all, but when you go back to earn a raise or a promotion, you're going to be initiating this sort of process, this sort of negotiation again. If you're seeking a new job, of course, you're doing it again. So this is not just a skill that you use within the context of negotiating a new job offer, but rather it's something that's ongoing and something where you want to check in with your boss every so often, maybe during your quarterly or annual review, where you go through your accomplishments and discuss with your boss, okay, what makes sense for me this point in terms of compensation, in terms of title, and maybe other benefits as well. So yeah, this is just a big picture perspective on this, and remembering that this isn't like a one and done, but it's always ongoing. And then, of course, the last step, the easiest step in some ways, because you've already done all this work to create the foundation and to prep, is to just practice, like with us or with a friend, a parent, someone who is willing to play that role for you and to give you that actual practice with speaking out loud, speaking these phrases. And I think, when you go into the conversation, you always want to sort of frame it as based on my qualifications, based on these results that I was able to bring, going back to that first part of knowing your value, and based on the correct market rate for this role, I was hoping we could move more towards this, whatever the position, whatever the salary range is. So that is kind of a way to think of it, not like I need this or I deserve this, but rather presenting it as one cohesive package. So I think I'm gonna stop there, because I do want to, give time for questions and thoughts and all those things. But before I do that, Patrick, is there anything that you want to add when it comes to any of this stuff?
No, I just, the line that sticks with me honestly is to try and straddle that idea between confidence and cockiness, right? And knowing what your value is, knowing that if this door closes, another opportunity will come to me, it will open up, and having faith in yourself, right? That you're fighting for something that you do truly believe that you're worth and valued for. So, again, I think the biggest mistake we see, students often just taking that first offer because they're just happy that somebody wants them. And I'm telling you, just like Stacy just did, you have a ton more value than you know. And the employer does not want to go through the process of reopening the search process and going through other rounds of interviews. It'll cost them too much money. So in turn, it's in their best interest to kind of play ball with you, assuming that you're being respectful and realistic in your demands and what you're looking for. So that's kind of where I'm at with it.
100%. All right.